But even most of the people who go to Davos aren't necessarily like de facto bad people. A lot of them are huge business owners who want to go to their like hookers and blow ski party once a year.
Is that there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the
Gerard's
tickets
like,
are.
I'm now
I've been wrong.
joining.
I've been so wrong about Davos this whole time.
Apparently, I've made calls to assassinate the vice president now. Like, people have said this on shows.
What?
Because you look too much like him, or
No,
there
because
can be only one.
If something happens and you are getting just completely torn apart in the public eye for doing something, then all of a sudden you come out as Christian, I gotta question the timing.
there were these churches that were nominally conservative, but they're pushing the BLM line.
It's actually going to get worse, especially with the introduction of AI, exponential technology, not needing humans to pretty much do anything.
What a lot of people don't realize about communism is that it works really well for like 6 or 7 years. And then they realize like, oh, we need a janitor. Well, I don't want to be a janitor. I signed up to be the poet.
Work would become the true purpose of their life. But by work, what he really meant was like the peasant work, right? The work he didn't want to do.
James, welcome back to the show. We're doing a special edition with Mr. Gerard here, co-hosting. It's been like, what, 5 years?
Yeah,
Four-ish?
like,
Four?
like we were like single digits or something. Like when you first started, you reached out, and I was like, heck yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, God, what was that, like 2020, 2019? I don't know.
I know, and it was Zoom, and I had no idea what I'm doing. I still don't really, but I'm stoked that you're here.
Yeah.
And DC was really fun. I'm
DC
glad
was
that you
fun.
came.
Me
I know
too.
you were hesitant
A little
initially.
hesitant.
Yeah.
A little hesitant, but
Yeah.
yeah.
You
No,
just
that was
have-
a lot of fun.
You have to find the right rooms.
That's the thing. So like, and that's my biggest problem now, right? So like intellectually, there's this thing called imposter syndrome, where people are like, oh, I got my degree, I got hired, I'm an engineer, and then actually I'm an idiot, and nobody here knows that yet, but they're gonna find me out, and so people are like really scared. I have like this weird imposter syndrome now, where it's like, who hates me? In like every room. So I went to these, you had me come out. I went and spoke at my thing in DC for PragerU, and I knew that would be a good room. And then you had me come out and hang out with you guys, and good room, very good room, yeah, good people.
Yeah. Do you ever have imposter syndrome? Is that something that Gerard Michaels ever suffers from?
No.
I didn't think so.
Gerard suffers from
Coach
being
us.
surrounded around actual imposters, which is so.
He's gonna find me out.
Yeah, I really struggled when I was with in Governor Christie's administration back in my other life. I really struggled like dealing with the politics of things, and something as simple as everybody is only friends with you if they think they can get something out of you, or they're constantly trying to flex on you or something like that. And I had come from sports, come from a team environment, so I was almost kind of like, it's a nice guys finish last thing. Like, oh, like I'm going to be good to everybody and they'll be good to me. And we're on the same team. And it's like, nah, dude, you're not on the same team. You're never going to be on their team. And you find out very, very quickly. And this was, we'll segue into our later conversations, like why I had such an adverse reaction to DEI and stuff like that. And it had nothing to do with race. I hated the blue blood yuppie that I was in the administration with, and they were like, well, what school did you go to? And I'm sitting here like, I went to TCNJ. I've been a public school kid in Jersey, and immediately that meant you were useless to them, and they were all Nepo babies. And then once DEI revealed itself to me as just Democrat Nepo babies, there's nothing you can do in that regard. You know what I'm saying? So I'd get very, very frustrated, and the only imposter syndrome that it would be different than imposter syndrome as it was, but it manifests itself the same way. You start feeling like no matter what I do, I'm not going to be part of them. I'll never be on the team. I'm not one of them. And it kind of saps your energy and even your desire to keep going in that. But then something happens, and there's a crescendo where like they reveal themselves to be like idiots. And you're like, oh my God, wait a minute. Like, a college degree means nothing. An advanced degree means nothing. There are people that are legit morons walking around with PhDs.
Absolutely.
And somewhere along the line, and this is a societal issue, and something both of you could speak on better than I can, but we replaced education with credentialism. And now these people are like walking around as if they are fucking Einstein. But no, what it is you got a brownie badge. You went to class enough for a long enough time. You're the 40-year-old with a black belt. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that's having a very adverse effect. And I think finally, thank God, society's kind of like, pulling the curtain back on that. So, long filibuster here, but I feel like the problem is imposter syndrome comes from actual, really intelligent people who have humility being surrounded by unintelligent people who don't. And that's what causes it.
That's my story arc, man. That's it. No, yeah, because like I felt for the last while, I've done a lot with like the conservative movement, right? And I was making jokes. Like, this isn't something I'm just saying now because like stuff's tense or weird or whatever. I said this on stage for years. I said this at a Christian pastors conference that I'm the right's ugly side chick, right? So like, I'm the moped. I'm fun to ride, but you don't want to be seen on it. And or the puppy dog kept outside the door.
Why'd you look
on the
at me?
leash.
No, I was waiting for. It's fine. Go.
She doesn't like my 3 a.m. choices. Anyway, go ahead.
You do what you got to do. And so I was like, always kind of on the edge of this thing. And it's like, am I in? Am I not in? Am I allowed? Am I cool or whatever? And then it became very clear in the last few months that it was like, no. And as you said, it's like you start to realize like, wait a minute. I mean, this is like influencer space more than it is like educated bullshit politics space. But it's like, oh wait, these are just influencers who are like groups that retweet each other, and they think they're cool because they have big Twitter accounts.
Oh, you don't want to get into the edgy boy beanie podcast club?
Well,
you don't like wearing ski caps and being edgy boy?
I've seen the ski cap come off. But no, not. It's like it's weird because I was like always like Tim, since you bring up the beanie, has always been very nice to me.
Whoever are you talking about, James?
He's always been very nice and very generous with me until like a year ago, and then all of a sudden it was just like a switch flipped.
Well, I don't mind Tim so much. The ecosystem that he surrounds himself with.
The ecosystem is a whole thing.
I covered the whole. Well, actually, we saw it together, and it's
Rescue the Republic.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
and like
show.
This.
Cool kids in the back tent. It was bullshit.
The cool kids in the back of the bus high school stuff was like, wait a minute.
So that was one of our near misses because that's one of the things I almost got invited to, but I didn't get invited to. And it's like, why am I like?
Was this before or after all of this stuff was happening online with like people actively trying to cancel you?
I wasn't actively being well. That's a little blurry because there was like a undercurrent of actively trying to cancel me, like through texts and DMs and stuff like that. That's been going on for like 2 years. But but that's like kind of more the crowd that I tend to run around with. Like I was literally that was Robert Malone spoke at that, right? And I was with Robert Malone in Narita Airport in Tokyo, and he was boarding the plane on the same, like an hour away from when I boarded my plane. I was going home and he was going to DC to go speak at that event. And I'm like, all my friends are there. Why am I not there? So I don't know what happened with that. It was one of our many near misses where we've, 11 times or whatever been in same city, same hotel, one day off.
Yeah.
So Rescue the Republic is kind of another example of that. And there's this clicky thing, right? And so I don't, it wasn't about Tim or beanies or anything else or the ecosystem. It's having become aware of being on the edge of that. And then the second that I started to say something that wasn't so cool with what, their zeitgeist is, it was like summarily dismissed, and not even dismissed, mean, like flip over, turn, be mean.
Well, let's be fair. You've been antagonistic to them as well, right? So, I mean, it's not like
the truth is
James.
A sword.
Yeah.
No. It's not poor James. I'm just saying that this has been revelatory in the sense that you were talking about. That you were running around with the kind of people who make my skin crawl, which are these, well, what school did you go to? Those are my least favorite people on earth. And then you realize like, oh, wait, it's all kind of fake, right? And then I've been running around and like...
Yeah, George Bush has a degree from Yale, just FYI. Everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've been running around in these circles that are like, we're the new ascendant right. We're the cool kids on the right. And at first, my cancellation that you bring up, I was like, guys, this is like not quite the way we want to go. I wasn't all that antagonistic about it. I'm like, here's information that you might want to know about kind of a bigger picture. And they got like, I started getting attacked like crazy for this. I'm like, I didn't know what was going on. Then I was like, oh, we're declaring war. I get it. And so then the antagonism starts. But all I wanted to talk about with that was the point is that I totally relate to that. There's a clique and you're not one of them.
Yeah. Well, they have presented their ascension and brand. And when I say they, let's call it the intellectual dark web that people have coined this kind of
dork web.
Sure. But it's frenemies. It's all the different little Soviet bloc legions of like, we'll all move in the same direction. I won't call you out for just regurgitating Ron Paul if you don't call me out for trying to present Murray Rothbard as my own thoughts, right? So, we'll build this brand. Don't step in you come on my podcast, I come on yours, but like we're moving in the same direction, but we're moving there like we don't know each other exists. And I don't like it. And Dave Smith, I love everything Dave Smith says. There's nothing Dave Smith has ever said that I've ever disagreed with, and I just can't wait for him to stop talking. And I know that as somebody that knows Dave, and he's not going to like this, but the truth is the most dangerous place in the world is between any one of these influencers and a mirror. They don't really care about the movement. They care about how the movement is going to help their ascension, right? This, same thing, Clint Russell. Another guy. I agree with almost everything Clint says. But man, Clint is just doing it to make Clint famous. Like Clint doesn't want to be a mortgage salesman anymore. He wants to be a pontificator. So
well, that's where I was going to ask about the difference between like what you guys think of MAGA versus traditional conservatives or Republicans, because I feel like there's like a bouncer at the door, right? And it's the same people that don't want to let you in, that don't want to let me in, that don't want to let you in. And unless you agree down the line with every single political talking point ad nauseum, well, you're not a purist and you can't come here because you're actually like in some way a threat to their existence. Like they think that you were going to make the Republican Party kind of crumble from within. So that's why they have to have like these really rigid moralistic rules and values. And if you're not like Christian and if you like it's all like the traditional talking points, right? Like Second Amendment, obviously I'm on board with that. If you're not an absolute pro-lifer, right, you just can't have any nuance. The bathroom conversation, I can't believe we're still having, because like I feel like I approach that in a way where it's not as clear cut as everyone wants to make it seem. We obviously were hanging out with all conservatives in DC, and this came up a couple of times, and I was like, okay, well, what bathroom do you want Blair White to use? And then they would get quiet, and I'm like, it's not that simple, and not everyone that is trans or has gender dysphoria is a predator. So like maybe create a third space, but there needs to be another conversation. But long way of saying there's like these gatekeepers that don't want to let anyone into the party, especially someone like myself. And they're like, well, what are you conserving? And I was like, honestly, I seem to be conserving the Constitution much more than you guys are, because I mean, the First Amendment, you either have a free press or you don't, right? And I'm a huge advocate of that, and absolute freedom of speech, like to a point where like, yes, you can yell fire in a fucking movie theater. I don't know who said that, but that's not illegal.
They were just trying to get black people to stop talking during the movie.
but yeah, so it's, I understand you can't let people in that are in direct opposition with your values, because that would be a detriment to the system. But I don't see, like, I look at MAGA completely different. I think it's like this new age, nuanced way of like almost the rebellious American spirit.
You're right. It has nothing to do with traditional conservatism. Go ahead.
That's why that's exactly how I feel. It's like I used to go into all these rooms and I was like, I'm more MAGA than anybody in here. Like, I want to make America great again. Like, it's kind of on the slide right now, and I would love for this place to be like thriving and exciting and prosperous and building and growing. And it's like, it's not this, I have this political opinion, that political opinion, whatever. It's, no, let's unleash the power of freedom and let people, like this guy, just some dude, I pay part of my problem, but part of my superpower is that I pay attention to just normal people, like small accounts, normal whatever on social media, on X. And this guy today, says something back to something I said, and he's just like, I just want to go to work, play my guitar, like really normal stuff, whatever it was. And it's like, yeah, that's what we all kind of, that for me, that's like MAGA's really like Trump's coming along and saying, you know, 2016, 2015, when he started pushing it, he's like, no, let's get back to what America always was. And then there's this, like you said, there's kind of two things. There's the, you're not conservative enough for us. And then you're not the it crowd that is going to be the vanguard, which may not even agree with that conservative movement, but there's a vanguard of this kind of elite club. You know, they went to that ball or whatever, and it all turned into this big controversy in D.C. where the dog pooped. The Passage Press thing or whatever, coronation ball. I looked that up, by the way. Obviously, we don't have kings, right? It is not MAGA to call Trump a king. So who's being coronated? Turns out that coronation is also a phrase that's used for a ritual to designate the ascendant elite in elite theory. And so they were coronating themselves. So there's this club that it's one big club and you ain't in it. And then they are like trying to set themselves as this vanguard of these, you know, standard old school conservatives who are afraid that, you know, something new or different might shake the boat. And so there's this split where like the libertarian free up America, like, you know, pro-Constitution side is a little bit like, does that actually work? They're not sure. And I hate that. So this is why I want to hear what you have to say, but I used to say I'm more MAGA than almost anybody in here, even though I'm not even traditionally a conservative.
So, yeah, this is great. I mean, there's three real different topics that we're talking about at the same time here. And the first thing first is that you're a little bit younger than we are, and it shows because you're so much prettier than we are. But
hey,
sorry, pal.
James, you're beautiful.
Sorry. But if you were in the late 90s and anybody was all politics all the time, they were a nerd. They were a geek. Leave me alone. We had a sense that regardless whether you were Republican or Democrat, we were all on the same team. We were American, baby. It didn't matter. Like, he's a little hippie. This one. My mom's a Democrat. My dad's a Republican. Like that would be the most rebellious act anybody can make. That's more salacious if that were to happen in LA than a black and a white couple. Like that's not even a big deal anymore, right? Like, but if a white girl from LA brings home a Republican, their parents would be like, "What are you doing to this household?" Right? So that's changed. Somewhere around Obama's second term specifically, I believe the Democrats made a deal with the devil, brought in the heavy socialists to win that second term, and then they kind of unleashed a golem that they thought they could control that they couldn't.
Yep.
And it's destroyed them. It's destroyed the Democratic Party. And it almost took all of us down with it. And what Trump really is, oddly enough, if you just take it from a spreadsheet, political science, yes, no, policy, audit, let's say, he's Bill Clinton. Donald Trump is a coalition building. You know how much we would have killed in 2010 to have a Democrat or a Republican president who would have two members from the opposing party in his cabinet? Right now, RFK, a Kennedy,
right,
is going to lose every vote in the Senate from the Democrats to be confirmed.
Yep.
So this idea of left and right, which goes back to the French Revolution, has to go away anyway. Look at, for example, Austin, right? Austin is considered a very liberal left place. But on the drive here, how many signs did you see? Save Zeitler Park, keep Austin weird. That's conservativism. You want to conserve Austin, right? And now you look at the Republicans who are like, we're going to Mars. That's progressivism, right? So this idea of like, I'm a conservative, it's nonsense. It's nonsense, okay? And these things they ebb and they flow. And it was odd to me that you were like, I can't believe how conservative this place is. When I was in D.C. 15 years ago, this was like this whole inauguration was like it was basically a libertarian hippie fest compared to what it would have been 15 years ago. Like DC was so uptight. DC has always been the cool kids, the uppie club, and it's always been like LA for ugly people.
Yeah, LA for ugly people.
Right. And that's so like going forward, and this is, you know, getting into the conflict in our conversation here, why I take issue with your woke right treatise.
Blah.
Well, no, we're going to definitely get into that.
Treatise.
We have to get out of the left-right paradigm. We have to do everything we possibly can to escape the left-right paradigm. And we also have to understand that those people are just power dynamicing you. You're hot. You're in a place where you're everybody looks at you when you walk in the room. So they have to take the power back immediately. And it's, oh, well, you know, you're not really one of us. Why not? Well, you're not like, you've never been a real libertarian until you've been called not a real libertarian. You know what I'm saying? And then once you realize what a libertarian is, you're like, thank you for that compliment. That's very kind of you, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, very, very, very long story, boring. I think part of the problem people are having, right, when it comes to politics is we shouldn't be focused on politics at all times, always. This has been a glitch for the last 10 years. This is unhealthy. This has been a civil war. It has been a cold civil war. It has been a culture war. And there has to be some sort of end to a conflict, which I hope that we're in. Yeah. Because like George Washington wanted to be a farmer, man. Like, you know, like jump at any point era. But
it's like the dude, there's just the dude on Twitter I already mentioned. I just want to go to work, dignity and work. He's not, I don't know what his job is. I doubt maybe he's like, you know, a CEO of some major corporation, but he's probably just a dude going to a job. He wants to play his guitar or whatever it was that he said. This is what most of us want, right? Like you said, George Washington wants to be a farmer. I 100% agree with you. I think it has poisoned us that politics has become our sports. It's become our religion. It's become our entertainment. It's like you watch how people interact, especially on social media with politics, and it's exactly the way that you shouldn't interact with politics. Yes, we have to be aware. Yes, we have to make our opinion. Yes, things have gotten crazy and we've got to, you know, in effect, take our country back. And so you have to get involved to various degrees. But at the same time, the goal should be to make things go back to normal, where politics is not the thing we're all thinking about. Because it's actually deranging to think about politics all the time.
Tribalizing,
It's totally, absolutely tribalizing. And I couldn't agree with you more that this is, I mean, I can blame the feminists if we want to go to where we can blame. No, because the personal is political.
I'll go nuts and blame the hormonal birth control more than the feminists.
Well, I mean, there's some dovetailing there, but the but the fact is that the feminists had this motto: the personal is political. So your personal issues were supposed to become political relevance or be brought into political relevance and then be taken into every sphere of life. And the problem with the political, exactly. But the problem with the political is if, let's say we're sitting here, the three of us, and we're having a good time. Let's say it's not a podcast. We're having lunch. We're having tacos or burgers or whatever. And then I start getting political. You guys have no choice. You now also have to get political, based on the fact that I've politicized the space. And so we've got this rampant politicization, not just of conversations, but of like every single topic. And then it gets coded, like you said, with this kind of screwed up, antiquated left-right paradigm that's not accurate to what people's are. Even if there's something to that, right? That's one dimension out of like 10 that are like, what if somebody's super left in economics and super right in social sphere, right? What do you do with that person? Are they left or right?
But they don't care. They really don't care. And you've written about this extensively. They don't care.
They do not care.
They care about the power dynamic within the group. And left in America, just call it what it is. Left means anti-white, anti-straight male, anti-American, or to the extent of like pro-globalist, less than America. And
this comes
America
from,
last.
This comes from Mao. Okay, sure. I mean, the Soviets before, but Mao refined this.
Gramsci too.
Yeah, Gramsci as well. And I called this, I actually am calling this, I've given talks on this, I'm in theory writing a book about it. I call it the politics of compliance. It's how you get a population to fracture so that you can get compliance out of them, like we had with COVID, right? And it's all A team, B team, right?
But James, isn't that the very reason critical theory was created?
Yes. Exactly why. And so what it does, to use other terminology that's popular on another side, is it creates a friend-enemy distinction in politics, which is what you said, that it polarizes. The second that there's like, oh, I don't know if you're my friend, like, because you disagree with me on some things, and everything is this kind of like existential fight as to whether or not we agree about
And you found an
2A
interesting
or abortion or whatever
You
else.
found an interesting correlation to the word folk in regards to this.
Yeah, folkish politics, which is super tribal. I mean, that's what folk means, is it's a tribe. It's a German word.
Volkswagen.
Volkswagen. Yeah, which apparently China's buying now, maybe.
Well, it owned Lamborghini. I didn't know that, right? So
I didn't know that either.
But yeah, so the folk, a lot of people think that the left, as we've called it, or the woke, these intersectionalists, right? That they think that they're just like pure like internationalist, universalist, everybody's the same. And they have that, but it's like a multi-step process to get there. So the first thing that they're actually doing is creating nations, like people groups that have core interests. You might say that they're oppressed groups or whatever language you want to use, but they think of themselves as a nation or a folk. How do you know? Well, it sprung out of, in the racial dynamic, out of black nationalism, which got taken over by black feminism, which became intersectionality. And then it sprang up in like one of the largest, like kind of grubby little publications in the, I don't know what to call it, the activist gay sphere. I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't use the acronym, right? LGBTQ space, because that's totally manufactured. But is literally one of the biggest publications is called LGBTQ Nation, because they think of themselves as a folk with a set of customs, with a set of
flag.
principles. They have a lot of flags, actually.
Yeah,
they have very many flags
for their very many nations.
For their microstates and it's a federation, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so you have to, they are thinking of themselves in this folkishness, this literally kind of like weird renegade nationalist way. And they're using that to leverage against the prevailing bigger entity, which in this case is America or any other Western nation that they're trying to attack with intersectionality or DEI. And I bring that up partly to say that this was a Soviet program, right? This was a Soviet program that was called Korenizatsiya in the original Russian. Stalin created it. Lenin, because Stalin created this, he didn't like Stalin all that much, and he called him the National Socialist because he was going to go around to all the different nations like Latvia, Estonia, Ukraine, and so on, and tell them, no, you're going to have self-determination within your ethnic group. And then what we're going to do is we're going to show you that you're not like the Russians, the great Russian over there, the white supremacists are not that good. We're going to make sure you're not like them and you have self-determination.
Stalin was saying this?
Stalin.
The Georgian?
Lenin called him the Georgian for this reason. So he went around as the emissary to go around and do this to all these different nation states under the Korenizatsiya, which means putting down roots program. And the program was designed to get them to see themselves as socialists in those smaller nations rather than to see themselves as part of Russia, and that Russia was a suppressive force. So the socialists would rise up using this ethnic animosity against Russians, and then they would cherry pick the socialists to become Soviets, who then eventually even had places in the Moscow government. And so they built out the world's first DEI program. It's actually referred to in some of the academic literature as the world's first affirmative action empire. That's the actual wording that gets used. It was the world's first DEI program. Mao imported it, so the connection to Mao is that Mao imported this, put it to tremendous use, combat Han chauvinism instead of white supremacy.
The four olds, get rid of the four olds.
Get rid of the four olds eventually, that's right. And so we've now imported those techniques to the degree that they've worked, created DEI. And so that is happening around these different ethnic enclaves, LGBTQ as an ethnic enclave, racial minority, POC, BIPOC, however they break it up, as ethnic enclaves with the intention of getting them to hate America. Mm-hmm. And then the goal is, just like what Stalin did after this, what do you think happened in Russia? Huge ethnic strife. So by the end of the 1920s...
Genocide's another word, but yeah.
Well, no, the genocide follows.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's the preamble to genocide.
Ethnic strife starts, and then in the late 1920s, it's kind of hit a fevered pitch. P.S., this is where we are in the story right now with DEIs getting backed off of. And Stalin says, now it's time for Russification. And the Ukrainians are a problem. And boom, Holodomor. 3 to 9 million people, debated numbers, starved out over the course of a couple of years in order to Russify everybody, to bring them all together as one Russian Soviet people. And this same dynamic can play out for any entity that thinks of itself as a folk, right? And so you tap into people's inherent tribal nature to set them against something that they're angry at that's bigger than they are, to stir their resentment, or as Nietzsche had it, ressentiment, that, like curdled, angry envy.
There's actually a word for this in German. I'm trying to remember, but I'm blanking. And it's basically exactly what you're talking about. And it is setting it's creating an environment for genocide.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me.
That's, it's like getting the people to a place where they're ready to eradicate the dehumanization, I guess, is the most direct translation. But there's an actual term for it.
But yeah, it all comes down to this folkish identity, right? You get people to think in terms of their people group, and then you get people to think, well, my people group is being threatened by the other people groups, and then you have warring tribes, and then the warring tribe phenomenon, and you can extract advantage from a balkanized interfighting dynamic. And that's what the left had successfully done to conquer the Democratic Party, basically.
Well, I'm always fascinated when people are able to somehow overcome not just the propaganda from the institutions that are attacking them, but then once the propaganda takes hold inside of a friend group or a group with women particularly, the women then become like, if you step out of line, you don't get to come to brunch with us anymore. My sisters are going through that now. I'd love to know how you came to be so not just, have the worldview that you have, but not do it quietly, to be so outspoken in environments where your opinions could not have been popular.
I don't know, because some people will commend me and be like, you're so brave. And Grimes actually had a tweet about this last night. And I was like, I feel this one so much, because she was kind of expressing something really similar, how people will applaud her for being the only person in a room that will say something. And she doesn't know if it's in her inability to read the room or her autism.
My autism is my special power.
And for me, it's like, I don't know if it's my inability to not speak up if I say something, or if it's just I'm kind of born that way. Like, I was kind of born with more of a fighting spirit, and someone who's just more comfortable on the outside of certain groups. And then women in particular, I've always been either more of a loner, or I always had dude friends. I never really got along with a lot of girls, but girls use social capital because most of them aren't physical, so they're not going to fight and punch you in the face to get a point across. No, they're going to reputation damage. They're going to ostracize you, and that's the violence that they choose. And it's absolutely still violence.
It's happened to you.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's happened to me since I was little. I moved around a ton, and as the new kid, you're always kind of the one that's getting the spotlight on you, and everyone picks at you because it's the same thing. It's tribalism. So you're the other. You're the new one coming into this established place, and we need to test you to see if you're a threat or not. And I'm like, fuck all of you, I'm not playing this game. So I just never really had any friends. And I mean, it works out, and in some way it's prepared me for the space that I find myself in now, which is going into these rooms, and I don't belong with all of the conservatives because I'm not conservative enough. I definitely don't belong with the liberals because I'm not liberal enough, and the libertarians don't know which way is up or down. So I'm like, well, where do I exist?
And oddly enough, you exist with 90% of us.
Right. But
it's only the 10% on either side
that are so loud.
Yeah.
And I guess I wanted to go into
By the way, my math was way off there. That was 110%. We try to agree with 10%, the 80 of us in the middle there. Sorry.
But yeah. So part of it is I think I'm born that way, and I think more people need to exercise that muscle. If you see something, you need to use your voice, because it takes 2 or 3% to really make a difference in this world. And while it might seem that everyone's against you, nothing is going to happen. Everyone's so... I get in fights with my in-laws about this because they did certain things during COVID, and they said that they didn't have a choice. I'm like, you always have a choice. Mm-hmm. And my father-in-law was getting a little bit riled up, and he's like, if someone puts a gun to your head and they say you have to do this or you have to do this, he's like, do you have a choice? And I was like, yes, you still have a choice. Even in that really extreme example, you have a choice. And the choice you're making, it might not be the one that you want, but don't excuse anything, own it all of the way, right? And he's like, that doesn't count. And I actually got my mother-in-law to turn around. But going into
that's the German.
What is?
That's the German excuse, by the way. Well, I had there was guns pointed at the entire nation. It's
So I was actually listening to a podcast the other day that was recording in person over at the Drinking Bros studio, and there was this former FBI agent there, and he was saying that during the Holocaust, that actually didn't happen. So they were talking to people that were dissenters, and they said, no, I'm not going to participate. Like, it starts with this one thing, right? Like, first it's just they have to put a star on, then they have curfew, then they have to go like live in this part of town. Oh, now they're just going on a train to go work. Oh, and then that turns into shooting infants because they're not contributing.
Now they just have to have a passport to get groceries.
So you would have some dissenters that are like drawing the line at like that obvious evil and violence, like, no, I'm not going to shoot an old lady or an infant, and nothing happened to them. They didn't die. Their families didn't die. They didn't even lose their job. So there's this false narrative that gets spread, which is if I say something, I'm going to lose my life or my livelihood. It's like, well, where have you seen an example of that? And even now, like, you had some of the soldiers that got dishonorably discharged because they didn't take the COVID vaccine. Well, guess what happened just a few years later? Now Trump is going back and he's back paying them. So, like, I think everything kind of works out in the end, and all you have at the end of the day are your convictions and, like, did you stand by your principles? Because if they crumble or if you waver just as things get hard, they were never principles to begin with, right? They only count in like these places where you're applying pressure. And it's like, is that emotional seam, is that going to bust, or are you actually going to stand in what you're claiming when it's easy? Because it's easy when it's easy. But I guess, like, circling back to, I wanted to get into woke right versus woke left.
Yeah.
And where I know, like, this is probably a thing that gets you a lot of shit because people are saying woke left is redundant and woke right doesn't exist. But what I see the parallel is just authoritarians. It's like both people that are so, like, eager to push their will onto you and to take your rights away if you don't agree with everything that they say. And it's the same on both sides. It's the whole horseshoe theory.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a correct view, that what's combining them is the authoritarian impulse to control other people for whatever reasons. There are differences, and like, so if we do use the horseshoe theory model, which some people lose their minds about, the ends of the horseshoe don't actually touch, right? So there's actually space between them. They're actually different from one another. And to your point, left and right are not the best way, but we're talking about a horseshoe, so we've got a left side and a right side. We've got to kind of stick with it. What we've seen is the communist or left side, and what we've seen with the fascist or the right, which is not, the fascism is not a right-wing ideology, but it's, I guess, to the right of communism. So what we see with them is that they have slight differences, but ultimately they are. In Mussolini's word, in fact, authoritarian's not enough. It's totalitarian. Mussolini said explicitly in the Doctrine of Fascism that, which is, of course, his kind of manifesto, that fascism is a totalitarian ideology. Then he has a whole section talking about how totalitarianism has never actually been tried in the world before, writing in the 1920s, I think. I'd have to check the date, maybe his late teens. So the idea is, at the totalitarian level, is that you're going to control what people have going on in their heads, all the way, like, totalizing every aspect of their being. What the left side of it, the Marxist side of that, the Marxist mythology, is that if we seize the means of production of society, which means totalitarian control over people's lives, thinking, everything, then we can end all oppression. And what the fascist side of that sees is, actually, nature's full of hierarchies. And if we don't acknowledge and respect that, then we're screwed. So therefore, there is a right hierarchy, and everything's bad right now because we're in a wrong hierarchy. But if we seize the means of control of everything and control what people think in a totalitarian fashion for the good of the nation or whatever they think is the right ideology, then we can force that oppression to keep everything stable. And so I think that the communist belief is much more whimsical. I don't think either one works. I think totalitarianism is evil in both cases. I don't believe the Marxist, mythology or religious eschatological belief, end times belief, that if you force the socialist state long enough, the state will wither away of its own accord when everybody is brainwashed into understanding how to be communist correctly, which is the true human state. That is what Marx actually wrote about what human beings are and what the point of his politics is. I think that's totally crazy. But that's why they can claim to be against oppression and on the side of the oppressed and so on for all of their bids for power, control, authority, totalitarianism. And the difference with the fascist side of this is that they flip it over and say, nope. The hierarchy is correct. The hierarchy is necessary. And of course, we should be on top of it. So it's rather than that the state withers away of its own accord at the end of enough oppression to brainwash people, it's that the state continues in a 1,000-year Reich. and it's going to persist forever in glory, and everything's going to be fantastic. So they have this slight difference between them. But at the end of the day, it's totalitarian. That's why it's a horseshoe. Totalitarian methods to make sure everybody's on the program. Now, they use social status of oppression as the mover in communism, and in fascism, the interesting object is what they consider to be the rightful nation. You have submerged oppressed peoples on the, whether it's economically or racially or whatever, on the Marxist side, and on the fascist side, you have this submerged nation that has been oppressed by, you know, bad politics, bad leaders, leftists or Marxists coming in and taking control, and so they're going to like set that to right. But it's still that woe is me victim mentality. We would be great except the wrong people are in charge, and it's then gives over to, you know, that mass movement in both cases, the mass movement, the mass line activity of what boils down to puritanical totalitarianism. Both models go back to the Puritan movement in England anyway. The Oliver Cromwell model where he took over and beheaded the king. So, and then the French Revolution's an echo of that, and then the communist revolutions are all echoes of the French Revolution, and the fascist white terrors are all echoes of communist red terrors. But it's the same thing with different polarity in a sense, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
So what would be an example of modern woke right?
So an example of, I mean, other than the people that are probably mostly trolls and foreign manipulations on social media that are outright Nazis, saying that National Socialism is the way, that which these aren't just like, you know, these weird accounts that were started like two months ago that have like 83 followers. Some of them have hundreds of thousands of followers. Mm-hmm. Some of them are real people who were not mainstream, but relatively well known within this broader conservative space that are now like Hitler. Like one of the girls, you remember that stupid calendar that was allegedly scandalous with the girls? Well, one of the girls that was in that, Lily something or another, is like all pro-Hitler stuff now. It's all she posts on social.
Oh, the blonde girl?
Yeah, well, there's like the redhead, and then the rest of them are blonde, right?
Okay, yeah,
I don't know.
That's true. The blonde conservative.
So like there are big accounts that were relatively mainstream characters that are pushing that too. So other than that, the biggest kind of reservoir of it, it's hard for people to see it that are kind of in the normal mainstream of life. I have to give a very controversial opinion about Christianity now.
Here we go.
It's not about Christianity itself. It's actually, I mean this genuinely as a compliment to Christianity. I refer to kind of the Christian world. There's kind of a Harry Potter feeling to it, right? Like you go through the wall and you're in a different world and magic exists over there. But it's Narnia, right? You go through the wardrobe. And what I mean by that is like, do you give one single shit about Southern Baptist Convention politics? Probably not. Could you name a single person that's a big deal in the Southern Baptist Convention?
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm talking about. For them, this is an economy bigger than Australia's. The Southern Baptist Convention represents an economy bigger than Australia's. It is the largest religious denomination in America. It has I forgot the numbers, but the electoral pull that it has is insane. And so these guys are politics all the time, jockeying for control over how the Southern Baptist Convention of network of churches and pastors and so on are going to think. But you don't know about it. You probably don't know anything about it. Maybe a little bit, I don't know. Yeah. But if I were to just go grab somebody off the street, unless they're in it, they don't know it, right? That's Narnia.
If you were to go grab somebody off the street, they could not name you 5 sitting senators.
That's beside the point, though. What I mean is, if they're not in it, they don't know it, right?
Sure.
So a lot of the woke right stuff is happening in this Narnian space, which is like, we don't really see it. They call themselves Christian nationalists or the new Christian right. These are words that they use for themselves. Some of them dabble into a broader reach, and they call themselves heritage Americans, which has a kind of academic literature meaning that's been co-opted to sound like something like an ethno-state, because that's actually what they mean by it.
You're talking about David Duke, you're talking Nick Fuentes, you're talking the Groypers, you're talking about...
Yes. And also people you've never heard of, like C.J. Engel, Nate Fisher, Joshua Abatoy, who are big movers and shakers in this kind of Christian Narnian world that the rest of us aren't looking at.
See, this is the thing. I don't think that that is atypical for any sort of big political movement.
Yeah, but
it's
the question was, why are they woke, right? And it's because they explicitly, and I don't mean implicitly, I don't mean I've identified it. I mean, in their own words, say they have adopted critical theory for their own ends. Stephen Wolfe wrote a book called The Case for Christian Nationalism. It was a very big book in those spheres. And in the book, on Twitter, he said, I have adopted critical theory, but not for the leftist purposes, but for my own conclusions. And they repeat this. They write articles about it. They say we're postmodern traditionalists. Postmodernism is not usually something we associate with conservatives. We usually associate it with being woke, right? And so there's this whole like ecosystem. Most of them are Christian nationalist types. Not all of them are. And some of them are, there's this weird thing in England that's called lotus eaters, that they're very into a very radical anti-liberal politics, and they use postmodernism and critical theory explicitly. They take pieces of Marxist analysis and repurpose it to their own ends. Marx was right about XYZ. His method of critique was largely right, so we can use that but not adopt his conclusions. That's a very common statement that they make. Literally write articles about, put on X, publish.
You're talking about like Sargon of Akkad and stuff like that?
He describes himself as a postmodern traditionalist on his bio.
He's an interesting guy too. He's smart. But
he is smart.
So this is where the convoluted nature of this becomes very, very important, I feel, okay? The woke left aspect, okay, is this ideal that from the left, they were then able to take these Marxist, right? What do you want to call them? Treatises, principles, and they subverted American politics. They were never overt about anything that they were doing, unless you were very well versed in what was happening, unless you knew what the four olds were, and you're like, why are they painting every street in America? Why are they tearing down statues? And you're like, oh shit, this is, we've done this before. This is not good. We should nip this in the bud.
Yeah.
But 99% of people had no idea. They were just like, anarchy in the US. Let's go.
On the woke right, though, they're just asking questions.
Look, I don't like that either. I don't like the idea. But as a comedian, I hate when I make a statement and then I get pushback. I'm like, well, I'm just a comedian.
It was a joke.
That's the Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart was worse for the American zeitgeist than almost anybody.
I agree with you 100%. By the way, we can do a whole bit on that later.
And I like Jon Stewart. I just wish he would admit.
I
do.
I
think he did more damage to America than anybody in
So do I, because
except Oprah Winfrey.
He never admitted he was a political operative. He never admitted he had an agenda and he was a propagandist. I'm just a comedian, And therefore, if you agree with what I'm saying, take it and run with it. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, come on, man, it's just jokes, you loser. So I don't like that. That Mott and Bailey bullshit's got to go.
Mott and Bailey bullshit's got to go.
So the issue I have with the... What's up, brother?
Thank you for using my vocabulary. That goes to Nicholas Shackle, but no, Nicholas Shackle coined that, and
I used to call it the victim bully roller coaster. I would see this all the time, and Candice knows me very well. I don't back down in positions where everybody else is used to white guys backing down. I double down, and
that's kind of like that.
They go from being bullies to being victims.
Cry
within
bullying.
2 sentences.
Yeah, cry bully.
Yeah. So I mean, she's a very famous sidebar, the very famous comedian now. I got kicked out of a comedy club in New York for life because I wasn't able to moderate my drinking, and by the third show and my 6th old fashioned, I couldn't just sit there and just roll my eyes. I actually had to engage in the conversation. As for the third hour, she was going off about white men and guns, and then I finally turned to her, and she was like 5'2", 110 pounds. I turned to her and I go, what's a more likely scenario? That I would need a gun to kill you, or that you would need a gun to stop me? You're a 5'2" annoying fucking brat who talks shit for a fucking living. 200 years ago, I'd bop you over the head, carry you home on my shoulder, and if either of these idiots tried to stop me, I'd just fucking kill them with my bare hands. Guns are the whole reason you guys are able to do anything that you do. Guns protect you from people like me, not the other way around. You think I want to live in a society where I just got to listen to you fucking retards? No. You know, this is you.
And then they were like, get out.
Yeah. And then they were like, did you just threaten her life? Then
You're
I got
not
the
a
email the
gentle
next morning.
giant.
They were like, did you threaten to kill so-and-so last night? I was like, that's what they took from that?
Well, it was like the internet before the internet, because that's how it is. All it is. It's like, I got this. I know we're off topic. I got this narrative out there right now that's literally being spread by like fairly prominent people that I made. They said you have to do the math to get to this. I think it's 2 + 2 = 5. But apparently, I've made calls to assassinate the vice president now. People have said this on shows.
What?
Because you look too much like him, or
No, because
there can be only one.
Because, and
I
I
knew it'd get
quote,
loud.
here's the math. Here's 2 + 2 = 5, right? So here's the math. I tweeted one time, not terribly long ago, that J.D. Vance at one of his talks, as the vice president, okay, so that's why he's relevant, used the same definition of nation that fascists use. So therefore, we're getting part of the 5 into this. Therefore, I called J.D. Vance a fascist. I don't think J.D. Vance is a fascist, so I didn't call him that, because I wouldn't call somebody something I don't think they are, and I would if I did. And so I've now called him a fascist by the funny math. And then secondarily, I said, because of the rising Nazi propaganda all over X, no other reason, I said this is a Bonhoeffer moment. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer was the German theologian who was attempting to rouse the church to stop the
Are you
Nazis.
getting paid by Angel Studios to talk about this right now?
I am not. I'm friends with Eric Metaxas, and he wrote the book about Bonhoeffer, though. So you can buy Eric's book, I guess. I don't know anything about the movie. I heard that it exists.
Or as the great Dave Landau says, Boneheffer.
Yeah, Bonhoeffer. So
The Schindler that didn't do anything.
So anyways, I said this is a Bonhoeffer moment, and Bonhoeffer was accused by the Nazis of calling for assassinations, was eventually arrested and put to death for it, and if I have the story right. And so because I said this is a Bonhoeffer moment, and allegedly through 2 + 2 = 5 math, I called J.D. Vance a fascist, I also by 2 + 2 = 5 math called for clear call, is what it said, for the assassination of the vice president. So these are tactics, by the way, that I do not, that was from a right-wing outlet. I do not associate those tactics with honesty or integrity. I associate those tactics with the leftists who attacked me 10 years ago when I exposed academic misconduct in the academic journals.
So there's 3 things I think that are happening right now, and feel free to address them. You could just say I'm wrong also.
Okay.
One, I think this is just Hegelian dialectic at warp speed.
That is.
It used to take
That's right.
150 years. Now it takes a year, right?
That's right.
Where it was, we look at communism through the lens of, well, that's crazy. Well, if you grew up in an aristocratic environment where there were lords and ladies and born into caste systems, you wouldn't think it was crazy. You'd say, fuck those people. They're born into it. They don't earn anything. Cromwell decided the only way to get out of this thing is at the edge of a sword. So unless you want me to kill everybody, we should make this more egalitarian. It's a fair argument. Ron Paul has a great saying about Bernie Sanders. He said the problem with Bernie Sanders is he identifies every problem with our system correctly. The bigger problem is that the solutions he offers would make them worse, right? So we kind of have that Hegelian dialectic in that I think a lot of these groypers and all this stuff. First of all, Nick Fuentes is a Fed. I'd bet my fucking balls on it.
Think he's a Fed?
Fed. I'd bet, yeah, Fed. There's no way he can say what he said, done what he's done, not be completely deplatformed, not be in jail. They put what's his name from the Proud Boys in jail for 20 years. He wasn't even in D.C. Nick Fuentes does that by fucking Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock. So
He was at the Capitol, like telling people disregard the police, go
Yeah.
in, it's our house, blah blah blah.
I've done enough stuff with the mafia, like Whitey Bulger. Everybody knows he's Whitey Bulger and he's able to stay out for 30 years. Guess what? That motherfucker sings like Pavarotti. It's, 1 + 1 = 2. Okay? Nick Fuentes is a Fed. Sorry. Number 2, I don't think any of these people actually believe any of it. I think 90% of the groypers and shit, it's anger transference. It's fuck you. You don't get to tell me.
I think that your hypothesis is not wholly wrong there. I do think, however, that there is a bid. So right now, there's been a massive shift in power in the United States. As you know, the Democratic Party is not in power. The Republican Party under Trump is in power. And for a while, it wasn't exactly clear because Trump was dead silent about his plans, I think very wisely, between the election and his
It was
inauguration.
dead silent. He had concepts of plans.
But it was not clear, like for sure, how this was going to go.
For
right?
sure, yeah.
We knew there might be
a
this
lesson learned from the first
correct,
time through.
exactly. We knew there would probably be some executive order shock and awe, but we were speculating. We didn't know for sure what the contents of that were going to look like. And in particular, just to name the one particular issue that gets banged on so much with this about Israel, we didn't know for sure where he was going to come down on it. And then he starts appointing, what looks like one of the more Zionist cabinets that's ever been. And then he's putting out we're going to round up anti-Semites and send them out of the country now. And so big shock there for a lot of people as to what direction he's going to go. But there's this power. It wasn't a vacuum so much, but there's this struggle to get close to the ascendant power, right? And so some of it, I agree, is this venting of adolescent anger, sometimes possessed by 40-something-year-olds, but usually possessed by adolescents and 20-somethings. And this, you've told me for my whole life I can't say this, so I'm going to say it, and they drop the hard R.
Because it's not said in public ever. It's only in these spaces that used to be chat rooms.
Right.
Now it's memes.
But there are people with designs, and there are people that are with designs that are foreign governments that want to destabilize our country. They want to destabilize Trump's ability to govern. The BRICS is a thing, that's in the world. BRICS is a thing. So that's China and Russia. That's the C and the R in BRICS, right? That's a lot of hostile foreign influence money. China spends $16 billion a year on foreign influence. That's a lot of money to buy bots on X, right? So there are a lot of people in the world, not just in the United States, who have designs not just to fill a power vacuum, but to distort the MAGA movement or the conservative movement or the United States overall or Trump's ability to govern. And I think that there are more operators, and it doesn't have to be very many, 3%, 2 to 3% can be a huge difference. Yeah, you have this venting adolescent idiot issue that used to be confined to 4chan and is now and then eventually Gab through, speaking of people you would maybe bet are feds, Andrew Torba being a major vector here, have matriculated onto X. And there isn't just a power struggle, but there are huge operations enacted to try to break our country. And they're going to channel through that adolescent rage. And they're going to channel as close as, it's how far can we take the mainstream conservative? Because I don't believe that the point is for these people to take over, by the way. I think the point is to spoil Trump. That's it. To make it so that in 26, we elect all these people who came in and voted for Trump are whoops, I voted for the wrong guy. And then they vote for Democrats, and you have a Congress that he can't work with. And then they vote for Democrat in 28, and we're back on the program.
So
and you have a 3, but
so no, well, that makes sense to me that this is some sort of deep state ploy to
that's all I think
right.
It is.
So
except let's be clear, I don't think everybody participating in it is an asset. There are also useful idiots. There are also grifters.
100%.
And grifters will latch onto a thing. Half these Christian nationalist guys that I was talking about, some of them that I named, are running weird real estate boondoggles connected. They're somehow going to
they're going to sell a shit coin or some shit like
intentional
that.
Communities, and we're going to get everybody to move to an area, and they're going to be the people who make all the money off the real estate. There's weird stuff connected to it, and this is that's Grifterville. And then there, you've got useful idiot town, and then you've got, operators.
Well, we talked a little bit about Rescue the Republic specifically because you weren't there, and I was everything that we just left at the Tucker Carlson event. So we went from Florida to DC for that, and both of them they felt like a sermon, and there was this huge overtone of Christianity and repenting, and a lot of this what seemed like false humility from my perspective, and I have no issue with Christians or Christianity in general. What I have an issue with is if something happens and you are getting just completely torn apart in the public eye for doing something, then all of a sudden you come out as Christian.
Russell Brand?
I gotta question the timing, and it happens a lot because that community is so forgiving. The whole religion is based off of love, forgiveness, and grace. So if you go there, the Christians that abide by that are going to offer that to you, right? So it's how much of this is authentic, and then how much of this Christian nationalism is actually propaganda and being paid for by something like Russia? Because to me, when you have this argument and they're well, we were founded on Christian principles, sure, but not as a Christian nation, right? We're not a theocracy. We're not supposed to be. We're not going to be Israel, and we shouldn't want to be that. It's freedom of religion and from religion, honestly, and everyone forgets that other part. So it's how much of this Christian movement that you're seeing that is visceral and honestly, it's like really aggressive. It's the opposite of what Christianity is supposed to be. But these people are the arbiters of truth. They are the ones that are going to tell you what is moral and what is not moral, and this is the only way to live a proper life. Like, how much of that would you say is authentic and like representative of the conservative right, and then how much of it is infiltrated?
I think it's mostly downstream from infiltration. There's always been a current of that. You know, you've got guys like David Barton, for example. David's a very nice man. I've met David, who's dedicated his career as a historian to trying to document the opposite of what you just said about how the founders really were, you know, profoundly Christian, and they intended a Christian nation and all this. And that, so there's always been this current of that within kind of the Christian conservative space, which that, you know, is fine. And that's a conversation, and those are debates worth having, and free speech, of course, dictates that we should be having. And honestly, we should be wanting to know the truth about those questions anyway. So yeah, bring it up, let's debate it, or let's debate it again, or whatever. I don't believe in like settled science and settled history. It's like, you know, no, let's look at the evidence, let's take a look, you know, maybe we've overlooked something, whatever. And so there's always been that. And that's kind of like this fertile ground. A good metaphor is like a farm, really. It's like this fertile ground for that to grow. I think that most of this movement has actually been constructed by operators, some of whom I think have pure intentions, and some of whom I think have very malicious intentions. Some of these operators came from the Department of Defense and then became Christian. They got baptized in what was at the time a conservative woke church, which was a thing. There were these churches that were nominally conservative, but they're pushing the BLM line. They're, you know, diversity parade during you know the sermon or whatever, one person after another.
Well, neo-Marxism learned from 80s evangelism. I mean, the cancel culture in the late 80s, early 90s was exclusively Christian in America.
So what would you say about a guy who worked for the Department of Defense and partly for the State Department?
He sucks. It's enough.
Then he goes and gets baptized in one of these woke conservative churches, and then he becomes the intern to the president of a major theological seminary in the Southern Baptist Convention. And then he gets moved over into the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University. And then that character seems to be connected to everyone in the White House and Congress and throughout the entire kind of, you know, big conservative space. And all he does is push Christian nationalist agitprop, most of which is like kind of transparently stupid. You would say this guy's probably an agitator, right? His name's William Wolfe. He is one of the primary pushers of and developers of the movement of Christian nationalism that has pulled so many good Christians along with. I suspect this guy is a dishonest actor. I can't prove that he's a dishonest actor. I've met him. He seemed at the time to be a nice enough guy. He's whatever. But I don't think that he's doing anything else than pushing an agenda. Then that agenda was probably set up for him. I can't prove that. I'm not claiming to prove it. But when you hear that history and you see how he acts and you see how he's always getting positioned, like he just moved his whole family to live in the same area. So he goes to the same church as the current president of the SBC, and he's lifting weights with the guy all the time now and posting videos of it on social media. This is suspicious. I mean, it's not suspicious. This is political operator behavior. Right? And I like how you just said that he sucks as soon as I said, you know, came out of the State Department and the Defense Department. So I think that there are, again, it's like the flock gets moved, lots of sheep get moved by a few sheepdogs and a few shepherds who have a stick or a whip or something. And I have a feeling that there are, you know, enough of those guys who have a coordinated plan. And like I said, real estate boondoggles. They have a secret society. They call it the Society for American Civic Renewal. It has a weird mark as its symbol. It's funded by a very, very bizarre, very radical, pro-Franco guy who calls himself a warlord, calls himself maximum leader. His name's Charles Haywood. Very interesting case. He runs this whole network. There are, I don't know how many lodges, but there's one in Dallas. There's one in Indianapolis. There are several in Idaho. I don't know where else they are. But this Society for American Civic Renewal is a secret society. So you know the secret handshake, and like, let's say you need something, you know, fixed in your job or your life or whatever, and somebody else in there is, oh yeah, we have a guy, he can fix that for you, like how the mafia works. That's happening, right? And it's like that game, Werewolves or Mafia or whatever, where there's a couple of people in on the secret and a bunch of people who aren't. And the people who are in on the secret can actually dominate the game usually because they're in on the secret. when you have a secret society dynamic, and this isn't me speculating, just secret society. I read their manifesto as a podcast. Like,
Can't be that secret, then. I mean,
well, if you want to know what's going on behind the closed doors, you have to be male. You have to be vetted. You have to meet whatever criteria they have. I don't know what they are other than being male and Christian, because I haven't tried to apply or anything. I don't think they're going to invite me. But there are they call them lodges.
the next logical step in your grievance studies dynamic is to, get into this under a false pretense, as Gustavo Franco,
Yeah, I totally would do that if I could figure out how to do that. I would call myself like, I don't know, Francisco something. Yeah, Gustavo might not work. But
Well, look, but this is America, though, right? So I mean, they're allowed to do this.
I think that's right. But we're also allowed to point and say this is what's happening.
For sure. And I think that's a necessary part of this, right? But one of the struggles.
I don't want them shut down, by the way. I'm not advocating for that.
And I think these white nationalists, Christian nationalists are fucking nerds.
They
Frankly,
are nerds.
They're just geeks, and I feel like they're outcasts, and they're in many ways just edgy boys that want to get a rise out of somebody because they can't do anything in their real life. They sit there at their 9-to-5 job, yes sir, yes ma'am, and then they come home and they just rage tweet.
Except for the ones that are deep state operatives,
Sure, that are trying to
stoke it and make use of it.
The same way Al Qaeda, the same there's always going to be people that are trying. Our FBI. Right, our CIA, they find that vulnerable person. They're like, "Hey, are you angry, bud? You know what happens when you mix fertilizer and gasoline? Oh, you're gonna love this." I think that one of the things I have to check myself on is constantly thinking the other person is evil. I disagree with their intentions. The World Economic Forum, like everybody's like, man, how do you know about the World Economic Forum? I'm like, I read what they post. They're posting it. They think
it's them.
They think that what they're doing is right.
It's their own documents and videos.
Like, this is crazy. How did you know this was going to happen? I'm like, they told me.
But even most of the people who go to Davos aren't necessarily like de facto bad people. A lot of them are huge business owners who want to go to their like hookers and blow ski party once a year.
Is that there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the tickets are.
I've been wrong. I've been so wrong about Davos this whole time.
The tickets are like $500,000 each. Of course, it's there.
You can still go, just not to the conference, though. A lot of people will go and say, like, I'm here, but they're not going to the conference.
Yeah, I was almost one of the outside lurkers this year, but it fell apart.
You can catch them.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm Ezra Levant, who does Rebel News in Canada, like caught Larry Fink himself and was like chasing him for 7 minutes with a microphone in his face, and he didn't say a word. But Ezra's great and goes over there every year and does that. So yeah, you could go and you could you could get all up.
Go partake.
I'm Gustavo Franco. I'm totally here for the globalism. Yay, go team.
You should tell them that it was a gun invented for somebody like you or for some.
Listen, so let me ask you this then, James. Well, here, let me see.
If I called these people woke nationalists, would it make you happier than
No,
woke right?
I just wonder if it's the argument of like the communist and the fascist is the same person. And it doesn't do either good. Because the communist sympathizer feels like genocide is okay because the people just didn't buy in. Then what the Nazis did was wrong, wasn't the genocide. It was the fact that it was group-oriented genocide. Big difference, guys.
Yeah, right.
As long as we kill everybody, but give them a chance to join first, then it was really their choice, right?
Right.
So that's what makes them... But there's inherent truths here, right? Like the woke thing is inherently anti-American, inherently anti-white. To call something woke white, it makes it easy to dismiss.
It's inherent. Well, I don't know that it has to be inherently anti-American, but it has to be inherently my poor oppressed group and some other group is at fault. And this is maybe the dork math in me because we generalize everything to its maximum extent. But when you generalize it out, it doesn't have anything to do with white. For example, in Russia, it was called not white supremacy culture, but Great Russian
But it
chauvinism.
wasn't called woke in Russia. I guess
the same model, though.
And then in
woke
China, it was left
called,
and the woke right. It makes it too easy to, I think.
Again, so if I called him woke nationalist and woke Marxist, would that make you happy?
I don't know. I understand what you're trying to say.
I mean, that might actually be better.
In some ways,
I'm totally happy changing that term.
They're both about obedience and they're both about social stratification.
Because I actually agree. I bet you if we get down to brass tacks, I don't like calling them right either because I don't think that they're on the right.
I think when you went with the woke right, whether this was intentional or not, I think it did harm to your previous work because it made it seem like you were trying to get back in the good graces of the academic left that you had subverted.
No. That's hilarious.
But it seems that way, right? It's like it felt to your fans, to the people.
Oh my God,
online.
guys! I don't want to be back in the graces of the left.
I never thought
it
that.
looked like from the outside,
the nerds and the academics, especially.
well, from the outside looking in, it looked like you got into your new elite friend group. We're like, oh man, these beanie yellow fucking Libertarians are pretty fucking lame. I want to get back in with my Oxford cronies. Let me back in.
My Oxford cronies.
The right's horrible. Let me back in.
I went to the University of Tennessee. That's a state school. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I was never like, I get the whole look down your nose. No, the academic left has been overwhelmingly my primary target for years. So let's dispel that myth. If that's what it looks like, I got some branding issues, I suppose, but that is not what the intention was. Let me give you the account for why I settled on the term woke right. I heard the term. I didn't invent the term, by the way. People were using this term almost 3 years ago. There's an article. You remember I mentioned that book, The Case for Christian Nationalism by Stephen Wolfe, who said he uses critical theory. And there was a review of that book done by Kevin Johnson, and he called it right-wing wokeism. Okay? And so woke or woke right was this kind of nebulous term floating around in articles here and there. An anonymous guy, he goes by Gummy Bear on X, wrote a really great Substack article about it back in like March. There's a guy that wrote an article about it, Neil Shenvi, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, something like that, again, reviewing that same book. And then this is a term that has been floating around. So I need a term, right? I decided I need a term. That's a term. Let's test it. And then I have this one litmus test for if something works. Did it cause the people I'm using it for to go nuts? I call it, and with the left, I called it the iron law. And it is an iron law of woke overreaction. I have like 4 iron laws of woke behavior, right? They're projection. They always project. Corruption. If you find somebody selling woke, they're probably getting a double deal. Overreaction. If you point something out and they flip out, you hit the target. And cosplay. Everything they do is fake. Iron law of woke cosplay. They're all dressed up as furries. You
were pretty gentle with Hotep Jesus, and he's 2 of those 4. Easy.
Oh, you were also in a thing with
did
Hotep?
a thing.
Very gentle with him.
That was an interesting podcast. But I did I had fun. But I was gentle. So when I used the word woke right, I don't think I used it. Maybe here or there. I could go check my X, like search or whatever, and find out. I don't think I used it. I didn't use it consistently for certain before October, right? It was like somebody that's allergic to shellfish ate a scallop. Like their face blew up to like 5 times bigger. It turned pink. I started getting like groypers all over me like ants, like I rolled around in a Texas fire ant pile. I'm like, holy shit, they don't like getting called woke right. That's the one I have to use until something better presents. And so it's like, in a way, yes, I know I did it. And yes, I know I poked. But in a way, from my perspective, they labeled themselves by being so inflamed about it. The problem is that a lot of folks like yourself and people in my general orbit and audience didn't understand what was happening. They have Tucker Carlson's understanding of woke, which is LGBTQ race communism, which, as you said, it's inherently anti-white. I don't think it is. It's inherently victim group mentality and scapegoat group as the cause of the problem, which can be white. It's the Russian term for it was great power chauvinism. So any great power, whatever cultural power, social power, economic power.
But that's cultural Marxism.
That is cultural Marxism.
But we're talking about woke specifically, which is in America in the 2010s. It's a very specific version of.
So maybe this is the problem, is I've spent literally my last 10 years of my life, not really, because nobody talked about woke before 2020. We had a similar fight.
My sister, I don't want to talk about it.
It wasn't the mainstream term, right?
Yeah.
We were looking for the term. Remember regressive left with the IDW crowd, right? We were looking for a term for these wokies on campus that we would call woke now, and it didn't stick until after George Floyd
Social
died.
justice warriors, and then there was...
Yeah, so we were looking for a term, and eventually we all just started calling them woke. And yeah, okay, fine. We can say that that's what it is. But I've spent my entire time since then trying to nail down what makes woke woke. What did they wake up to? right? And I mean, in the original German, you know what they called Germany under Hitler, right? Erwacht Deutschland.
Erwacht Deutschland?
Yeah.
What's the Erwacht? Oh, it's Awakened Deutschland.
Awakened
Is
Germany.
that right?
Yeah,
Oh
look
my
it
God.
up. And they called themselves the Awakened Germans. And so it's like, what did they wake up to? And it's the idea that there is a group identity that has been submerged by an illegitimate power dynamic. And that illegitimate power dynamic needs to be overthrown in order to restore order.
And is that why, again, going back to that Hegelian dialectic, we've talked about it in previous podcasts, where Nazi Germany is a direct reaction to the Weimar Republic and, you know, the abuses and the social degradation that was happening, right? So, and you mentioned Franco Spain, where the idea that there was communists versus fascists, and there was nobody winning. So you're looking at this moment, and your red flags are going off, saying, "Well, in this vacuum, it's not us normal people that are going to win. It's going to be
the pendulum is being swung. It doesn't swing back and forth. It's like there's another dimension. It swings like this, right? It's going somewhere. That's your Hegelian dialectic. Let it go left, let it go right, but when it comes back right, it goes somewhere different.
Until
let it go
breaks,
left. Yeah. Or to, swing it here, and when it swings back, you move it so it hits your enemy instead of you, right? You swung it from here, and it goes out and comes back somewhere else, right? And you can imagine that, like, if you played tetherball, because you probably took one in the face at some point in your childhood. I don't think they're allowed to have tetherball anymore. Did you grow up on tetherball?
Yeah, but I was a sick athlete. I was the guy that dominated everybody.
So you were the one hit. You were the
time. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that.
In that
he
regard,
was built like you too at my school.
Well, that's the problem. The problem with like fascism is when you're like a 15-year-old kid, you're like, why shouldn't I rule the world?
I mean, that's literally it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, my red flags are flaring. I don't care what we call this. That seems to have stuck mostly because they flipped out about it. But I don't care what we call this. But it's like I read Mein Kampf, right? The first 3 or 4 chapters in particular, where he's outlining why he lost his marbles.
You published Mein Kampf.
Well, I did. Well, I got leftist academics to publish Mein Kampf in a social work journal, by the way. And so I read it, right? And he's like, I had to adopt the Marxist methods for my own fixed conclusions. And it's like, uh-oh. And then you start seeing him, and he's like, I wandered the streets of Vienna, and then I finally encountered like an Orthodox Jew and the whole, the dress and everything. And he's like, what is this thing? And then suddenly I realized he's not a German. And the Jew is a different thing entirely. He has this whole thought process. And I'm watching this thought process happen again. And I see that we are in a very Weimar America again. We're in similar, they get to tell the truth to mislead people, right? They tell the truth. What books did the Nazis burn first? Well, they were pervert books. This is true. The same kind of crap they're sticking in our kids' school libraries are the books that the Nazis said, let's round up and burn. At first, it expanded from there, including literature, but it was pretty perverse stuff at first. And they can tell the truth and say, that kind of a thing, and then lead people into, well, that was the solution. It just wasn't done right the first time. So it'll work this time. And I'm watching. It's just like, if you've read Mein Kampf or you've read the history of Italy as it tipped into fascism, you're just seeing like red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. And then you have to remember, because we already talked about the World Economic Forum. We could throw in Xi Jinping. We could throw in Vladimir Putin. We can throw in, whoever at the United Nations.
We haven't talked about the Vatican once.
We can talk about the Pope. All of these people know this history too. And they might not be reading it as a book of warning, but rather as a playbook.
Well, because it works, unfortunately. Because it works.
But the way to make it not
Obama
work.
said he read he only read Marx in college to impress the chicks. Is that what the guys did to you? They read you some Plight of the Proletariat stuff?
No, I was not. I had like a tiny feminist moment in college, but not to that extent. I was actually Marxist for about 48 hours.
Really?
Communism as the positive transcendence of
I
private property
to,
as human self-estrangement, and thus the return of the man to his true, which is to say, it's true, which is to say human self. Social, which is to say human self. I knew it wasn't true. True self is the social self in Marx. So I quoted Marx. So there you go.
There he is.
Did it work?
Clothes are coming off.
Didn't work. Well, that's a different show.
Keep going.
No, I listened to it was like a 4-hour podcast. It was on Lex's show with Robert Wolf, I think is his name, and he knows his stuff, and he can present it in a way that is so romantic. But at the very end of the podcast, they got rid of personal property, And I was like, oh no, you lost me. Now I'm out. Because we have this example of unchecked capitalism, like crony capitalism, and that's also not good. Like, I think in the most ideal form, capitalism is the best model. And it's still like the version we have, even though it's super corrupt and shitty at times, it's still the best version that we have.
We don't have capitalism now. We have corporatism.
Well,
And true
because
capitalism,
they're getting bailed out and all of that. Yeah.
like, we have, your losses are yours, but your gains are everybody's, and
right.
Unless it's our losses, which is everybody's losses, and it's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, we're adopting the model, the Dengist model from China, which we built.
Yeah.
Kissinger goes over, teaches Deng Xiaoping how to have a crooked model in order to try to open up business opportunities. Allegedly, maybe he's an operator, who knows? But he goes over, teaches Deng Xiaoping, like, let's create this hybrid economy. They have this kind of corporatist, aka economic fascist, which isn't the same as the ethno-nationalist cultural fascism. And so they implement that, and this is the Deng Xiaoping open up one country, two systems model they've been running since the 80s. And then this ESG, World Economic Forum, inclusive capitalism, there's your Vatican. Inclusive capitalism, BS.
Stakeholder capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism is the Soviet. It's the same model, but it's being introduced through, like, I mean, everybody's not allowed to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy anymore because, like, they nuked him and all of this too. But Vivek was very, very good at talking about what they do through the front door of government, what they can and what they cannot. They go through the back door of the corporations to get
NGOs,
done. And NGOs, that's the third leg of that stool.
Yeah.
As we are now starting to discover hugely with the migration.
Might be the whole stool.
It may be
and
almost the whole
NGOs
story.
have been running everything for so long. I mean, what's your ideal form? We're coming into the fourth industrial revolution here. AI is going to change everything. We can identify accurately what the pitfalls and what our fears about modern times are and the political movements at hand. But what are our solutions? What is if in your ideal world for you and your children going forward, what structure and system do you want to live under? What do you feel most comfortable in?
I mean, I think the original version and vision of America, right? Like, if we can somehow get back to that, which was a very small government. It's where the government feared the people. You had way more sovereignty than you have now. And we've almost been hypnotized to forget that that's even an option, right? Like, so many people have become so dependent. And I think, and I hope I'm wrong, that it's actually going to get worse, especially with the introduction of AI, exponential technology, not needing humans to pretty much do anything. They say roughly about 90% of jobs that exist now won't exist in about 10 to 15 years. So that is going to create the perfect ecosystem to usher in UBI, because now we're not going to have a choice. Otherwise, we're going to have the infrastructure crumble, right? So when we can't do that, because then that is a direct lead to violence. If I can't feed my kids or if I can't stay warm, then we're at war with each other and our neighbors. So we have to do UBI. Well, we saw what happened during COVID when people got just like a little bit of money, like enough to just skate by. So many people got lazy, and you had these idealists or these utopian, like these people that believed in a utopia. And they're like, well, if we can just make sure that people can eat, then they're going to do their best. They're going to have so much less stress that like the best version of themselves is going to come out. That's not what happened. We saw actually the opposite. We have a couple of restaurants. It took us, I mean, still we're understaffed. It's these people that like, they were getting like $1,000 a month or something. And that was enough for them to sit at home, drink, get groceries, and they're not working. And then when they go to work, they're like begrudged because they have to serve somebody. So I think when we introduce the UBI, the very romantic and optimistic view is that people are going to finally be able to create again. Craftsmanship is going to come back. Mastery is going to come back, because that's totally gone right now,
I will
right?
hunt. In the afternoon, I will be a poet.
There will be like maybe a couple people that take that opportunity and they truly develop themselves. But I think at scale, you're going to see the opposite. And it's going to be like this numbing of what the human spirit and essence is supposed to be. And to me, that's going to be really dystopian. So what do I want to see? I want to see people that struggle enough that it keeps them like alive and gives them purpose. I want them to be creative. I want them to value freedom. I want meritocracy to be the model for everyone, and not nepotism or not I fit into this weird intersectional bucket and now I have this this opportunity. I want to go back to finding shared values. I think that's really important, and like highlight the things that are important to us as Americans, which is freedom and sovereignty, and not find these nitpicky things of like, you're not good enough to be here, right? So it's like, what can kind of unify us, because that's going to have to happen. If it's the robots against us, like the thing that is going to save us is our humanity. And if we don't have that, we are fucked.
I think and spray foam. Yeah, spray foam like locks them down.
Everybody's going to agree with you. Everybody is, everything you just said is a populist message that would get you elected. Why do you think that it seems like it's an impossibility for that to be the future?
Similar to what you were saying earlier, and I've used a similar example, which is you have sheep, you have sheepdogs, and you have wolves. And when I say sheep, I know it sounds derogatory, and it's actually it's inhumane, because you're taking the humanity, you're like comparing them to an animal. I get that. That's not my intention. I don't have a better example.
I mean,
but
Jesus did a whole ministry doing that to all of his own people.
Calling them the flock.
Yeah.
So it's not meant to be derogatory. It's just saying, like, for whatever reason, and you can take it where like spiritual or just people people are just too busy and inundated with daily life, but most people are not paying attention to things at scale.
It goes, what you're saying is right, but I think it's more inherently human than something that if you send your kid with $5 to school for lunch, and everybody does, is every kid going to end up with $5 at lunch? Or some people going to beg and take $5. I need more milk. Or some people going to steal lunch money. You know what I'm saying? Like Lord of the Rings hierarchies, they form within 5-year-old social groups.
No, that's actually been debunked several times. So there's this idea that if you leave kids alone, that it's going to eventually lead to Lord of the Flies, right? Like,
what did I say? Did I say Lord of the Rings?
You said Lord of the Rings.
Did I say Lord of the Rings?
I just thought you wanted to go to the
I knew
Shire.
what you meant. Yeah.
I didn't.
I might.
So it's going to turn into Lord of the...
Thank you for translating me for the world out there.
You're welcome. So it's going to inevitably turn into Lord of the Flies, and there's going to be chaos, and eventually some kind of hierarchy is going to be formed, right? And like the kids are going to be really shitty to each other, essentially. They've done this, and a lot of times with girls too, but they've done it with boys, and it depends on the kid, and it depends on the groups. Like they have done it very successfully, where the older ones would start like designating roles and responsibilities and jobs, and they would start figuring out lunch, and it started to really function in a beautiful way. And you have to ask yourself, what is the inherent nature of human, right? Because we only have these tiny snapshots, and we've had this little experiment going on for the last few hundred years where we actually kind of have gotten like so far removed from our actual nature, right? We've like been trying to force domesticate ourselves in a lot of ways. And it's like, if you were to go back in time where you had multi-generational homes or homesteads, or you were spending all of this time in nature, and you were working, and you were exhausted, and you were hunting, and you were gathering, and you didn't have one deity, right? Like you were honoring everything. Like you were honoring nature, you were honoring several different kinds of gods. And that's going to sound crazy to some people, but we were more tapped into spirituality, into actual essence of what God and love was. And I think that was our nature. And what we've been doing now, I think, is more inhumane and more out of alignment. And I know this is probably sounds like really heady or weird. I'm sorry if it does, but I think if we were to raise kids more intentionally, more lovingly, not on this consumer model that we've been on, I don't know. I think we'd be better off. Like I don't know if that answers the
egalitarian
question.
UBI communism, it's only going to work if you could somehow breed out parts of human nature. If you can breed out jealousy, if you can breed out resentment, if you can breed out comparison and competition, because. And you know, you could probably speak to this more, but what a lot of people don't realize about communism is that it works really well for like 6 or 7 years. Like it's great until the party ends. And then they realize like, oh, we need a janitor. Well, I don't want to be a janitor. I signed up to be the poet. I put in for rock star, you know, and no, somebody's got to clean up the mess. Okay, I'll clean up the mess. For money. Yeah. You know, like, well, if you're not cleaning up, I'm not cleaning up. Well, if he's not cleaning up, I'm not cleaning up. And the system collapses. That simply. The cascading effect of if they're not doing it, I'm not doing it. Unless you could breed that out.
That's actually what Marx wanted, by the way. It was like the breed or brainwash, but the idea was that humans would have to fundamentally transform in order to make life or work would become the true purpose of their life. But by work, what he really meant was like the peasant work, right? The work he didn't want to do. Yeah, all the janitor stuff, the dirty jobs that Mike Rowe signs up to do, but he didn't have to do. But that for a TV show, right? The stuff that nobody is like growing up as a kid and is like, what I want to be is the guy who cleans up dog poop, you know, but that has to happen, right? And so then money solves that problem.
Well, the problem is like, this is not new. You do say like 200 years, but Aristotle was talking about society cannot evolve to its potential unless everybody understands that there has to be a slave class. We talk about Aristotle like he's a genius. If you read Aristotle, he's a fucking lunatic. He's nuts. A lot of the stuff he says would be considered fucking asinine. But, you know, he's put forth as this, you know, great model thinker. And in many ways, he's the founding father of fascism and in, you know, totalitarianism. He's like, listen, guys, there's some elites. I'm not going to say it's phrenology, but like there's some other people like they got to be slaves, you know? And that's Aristotle, you know? So like the fact that we've evolved past that place where like, even as our society, as messed up as it is, there's kind of a place for everybody now in Western society. Like we focus on the fact that our system is imperfect and we really try to fix these imperfections, but we never look at like what's going on and going like, fuck, man, we've kind of figured some shit out here. Like we got a pretty good thing going on here. Famine, gone. You know, we have an obesity problem, right? Like, can you imagine the history of humanity if you could have gone back in the Roman times when they were like desperate to try to get grain shipments from across the Mediterranean and be like, check it out, bro, in 1,000 years, everybody's going to be so fat. Like, it's going to be nuts. You know, and they'd be like, no way. Be like, yeah, man, it's going to be nuts. Like, people are going to be so fat. Like, there are going to be these things called stretch zones that open up where other people have to touch your toes for you. Like, get the fuck out of here. There's no way. We did it. We solved it, right? Like, you know, the more we kind of fixate, I feel like, on the minutia and the problems, those bad actors that you talked about before are able to then weave in that little, it's like that little hole. That like, you pull at that thread and it ends up being this giant gap.
What I used to describe critical theory as is imagine, I used to go to these, you know, it's a conservative convention, so I gotta like make it relatable. Nobody's ever heard of it. And I was like, imagine you have your American flag and somebody's job is to just find that loose stitch and just pull at it till the flag falls apart.
Yeah.
Every stripe, every star, everything. And that's right. How did we solve that though? Is like, I mean, I hate to sound this way, but in a sense, the answer is kind of money. Because, you know, the old saying is there's only one color in capitalism and it's green, referring, of course, to our dollar bills that aren't green anymore. But we all kind of know what it means, right? And I guess it could be a double meaning on envy. But the fact is, like, what does communism do? Well, one of the slogans in China was work hard for 3 years to make communism or whatever, to make everything better. I forget exactly how it ended, but it was work hard for 3 years for whatever. So everybody thought if they just pitched in hard for 3 years and literally made themselves slaves to this vision of the future, then they would get it, right?
And what is forward?
That's exactly what I'm talking. That was actually this is where the slogan comes from. And work hard for 3 years for a better future. Also, there's a miniature one before that was called the Socialist High Tide that Mao did. Work hard for 3 years. And then for like, I'm reading this book about a young German girl who became a Nazi in 1933. And she's explaining why she became a Nazi. And it's a very interesting read. After she's, you know, it's in the 50s, late 50s, she's deprogrammed and she's explaining how in the world did I become a Nazi. And she's explaining that it was love for Germany. It's the nation. I'm going to go she was basically making herself, in her own words, like a socialist slave. She's working for basically nothing, almost no money. She didn't even like taking money sometimes for the work that she was doing. A lot of it was really degrading and difficult work, stuff nobody would want to do. And then she was doing it because Germany needs it. So now you've got the ideal of the future for communism. You've got the ideal of the nation for the fascists. And like you said, you know, a few years later, it's kind of like everybody's like, this still sucks. And it falls all apart. On the other hand, what was your answer? I'll clean up. I'll be the janitor for money. You give me something that becomes kind of this universal object of utility that I can use to pursue whatever I want, whether it's my child's education, whether it's, breakfast tacos, whatever it happens to be. And yeah, I'll do your crap job for you. I'll do something really awful, and I'll be not only do it, I'll be happy that I get to do it. As long as I took a management class in college, and they talked about the paradoxical motivational effects of money. You've got to hit the sweet spot with how much you pay people. You can't pay them too little, or they wash out completely. You can't pay them too much; they wash out completely. You also, UBI falls into that because you're paying people for nothing. Actually, what you're paying people for is the data you're extracting out of them for using social media. So they're actually buying from you what they use to control you, and that's what justifies the payment system and the AI. But they're paying you for nothing. And what happens when people are being paid for nothing is their motivation falls apart. And in the real life examples where they've tested UBI for 18 months at a time, whatever amount of money, what they find is that the people don't, let's say it's $5,000 a month, that's $60,000 a year. They don't increase their income by $60,000. Their income actually goes down.
They reduce their productivity.
Because they reduce their productivity and actually fall below the standard that they had previously. So they come out net negative because this laziness factor comes in because of the weird paradoxical ways that money motivates people. And so you have to hit the sweet spot. You have to pay people what they're worth. And how in the world would you figure out what they're actually worth to do jobs like that? Well, it turns out that a market conveys exactly that kind of information very efficiently.
The invisible hand, baby.
And if you don't have freedom, like she was talking about, if you don't have that freedom to think for yourself, to say, no, wait, screw Germany.
Yeah.
I need $5 more an hour to do this crap for
James,
Germany.
The problem becomes, though, that freedom involves the freedom to fail and freedom to make bad decisions.
It sure does.
And not to be myopic or overly simplistic, but the reason we've had this conversation as a species for tens of thousands of years before, and the reason we're going to do it, I think, for tens of thousands of years, everything we're talking about can really go back to the feminine, want to nurture, low, I don't care, how many lands you conquer. I'm going to keep my babies safe, and we're going to, make sure that we have enough.
Yeah, it's that meme with the girl.
It's a
like,
very high
if you had
floor.
to say, how long is it going to take before you come back, or, from the conquest or whatever.
High floor, low ceiling versus very low floor, high ceiling. Hunters versus gatherers. The feminine versus the masculine, and that's what we're living in.
And so Candice mentioned the intergenerational household. I don't know if that's a part of the solution or not. I don't hate it, but what one thing that the intergenerational household represents is one of the missing ingredients in this, because you said it's got to include the freedom to fail, the freedom to have everything go wrong, to risk and lose, but also to risk and win. And then you have this dynamic between the sexes, right? And you have all these other dynamics. Well, there used to be this thing called wisdom. People were, I think the joke is wisdomous, or wise. And so the intergenerational household, the idea was that you had elders who had a few more winters than everybody else, a little bit more experience, who were close by to the youngins, to the people in the middle. And there was this kind of this cycle of wisdom. I see so much intelligence and so little wisdom in our political environment right now. And we talk about, with the AI, not to have completely lost that topic, but I don't think I've ever seen something that's more like, autistic super intelligence, no wisdom, than this entire lurch into,
well, it's just mapped off of Elon's brain. So of course it's going to be
Yeah. It's like this thing that just came out, DeepSeek from the Chinese, which how in the hell anybody decided to sign up for that? I'm not positive.
Also, where did it come from? Well, I'm in the crypto space, and it was like, oh, by the way, your NVIDIA is worthless. I'm like, when did this happen? What?
You're not supposed to call them tricky Chinese, but
yeah, right.
But no, so DeepSeek comes out.
It is the year of the snake.
And then I just saw this morning, and I'm gonna kill this because I didn't read the article. I just saw the X headline or whatever, like the articles. Somebody, it's a thing because X suppress. Hey, Elon, you suppress external links, so people just take screenshots of fucking articles and don't post the articles anymore, so you don't know what they say, which is not so great. I see the headline, but somehow OpenAI and Sam Altman is like, oh, they trained DeepSeek off of my technology. And I'm like, of course they did. First of all, the Chinese steal everything.
Talk about a bad
PRCs.
Actor,
So indeed, I'm not defending. I'm just saying that it's like the lack of wisdom. Like you put out this thing and, bad actor plus, but you put out this thing and don't realize that really bad actors with hostile intent are going to be able to model their program off of you and then basically tank you with it.
But isn't there a narcissism like I'm Ozymandias? They can never beat me.
Yeah, I don't know if wisdom and narcissism have ever been in a relationship together.
That's fair.
Yeah, so this is my point though: is somewhere the missing ingredient of is wisdom, and intergenerational households definitely were an access. I ran into last night. I went to get dinner at the hotel bar, and I got some tacos and some margaritas. And this dude sitting next to me is from Louisiana. He sounds like he's from Louisiana. He's telling me he's like, he's drunk or whatever, and he's all upset, and he's like just random talking to people in the bar. But he's like, I'm a coon ass. I'm like, oh, you're from Southern Louisiana. And we get talking, and he's like, how'd you know that? And he's telling me all these crazy stories about being, a Southern Louisiana coon ass guy, and it all comes back for him. He's like, we're losing it, man. Our families used to be huge. We always listened to what Mama had to say, and this whole like generational wisdom ingredient is just not here.
It's IQ too. I bet you that guy thinks he's got an 80 IQ and he's probably got 100 IQ, and then somebody that is the professor of professor in education at LSU is probably a 90 IQ. He thinks they're a 120.
Have you seen that little video just the video where they got a bunch of people together and they had them estimate their IQs and like talk about how smart they were, and they all took IQ tests, and of course there's like some like uppity white girl who's all like, she's like, she decides she's the smartest person in the room, or they whatever, and then the IQ tests come back and she's like,
that's the one
with the Marine, and she's like, he's an idiot.
Yeah, he's an idiot.
And he tested the highest, and she was like dead last.
The midwit problem is for real too, right? And that goes back, not to pull a callback in our talk, but this goes back to where we started with the kind of cliques and the
well, it's intentional, right?
Blue
Like
bloods.
Credentialism is intentional because you even hear it now, like with the trust the science people, and everybody is, they're all uneducated. Well, to me, now that I hear that, I'm like, it sounds like, they're all not indoctrinated. They're all, they haven't gone through the obedience training.
Well, that's Michael Malice's
right?
hypothesis about like totalitarianism, is that midwits and idiots like totalitarianism because they can't compete in real things, but they can compete in obedience.
Being told what to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I've been to China. I've seen, it's not everybody, but I've seen that. I've talked to people, in China, and I'm like, well, what about the system and, the politics or whatever? And it's probably close to a solid half of them are like, well, we like being told what to do. It's less to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Really? I had this conversation. This is actually
men and women?
Mostly women, but that's kind of an artifact that I was running around with a bunch of American men, so we were mostly around Chinese women. But I didn't talk to as many Chinese men.
Mostly women with remarkably beautiful small feet.
Yeah. How did you know? Have you been to? Were you there? But I had this conversation. Actually, this is one of my red flags. I don't remember when this was, but it was early. Like, I was still like pretty. I think I was just out of grad school or still in grad school. So it was before I was like this kind of a big woke, anti-woke culture guy or whatever. And I had a friend from my math PhD program who openly described himself as a feminist, a male feminist, and whatever you want to say about that. But he said one day to me, he said, and this would have been about 12 or 13, I guess. And he was like, I eagerly look forward to the day our feminist masters take over.
What would Gad Sad calls those guys?
Sneaky fuckers.
That's the legit. That's not a Gad Sad term though. I mean, as much as I like Gad, that's the legitimate biological term.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not.
For like certain species,
for a type of
birds.
beta,
really,
for a type of beta cuck, quite literally. It is. They're called sneaky fuckers.
Mm-hmm.
They wait till the male is off hunting or whatever, and they sneak in and like, hey baby, you lonely? He's so busy. I'm nice.
I'm a good
under
listener.
the sea Jodies. There's like
But what he said was, I said, why in the world would you look forward to that, right? As a guy, he said how naive I was. He was like, if women are telling me what to do, it's just that much less for me to think about. And it never, I always thought that guy was just a weirdo after that. But until I heard Chinese people under the CCP say that they like being bossed around by the CCP.
Wow.
With the exact same justification, I was like, holy shit, some people want this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that goes back to the bad operator thing. And I think it was you that taught me this. But apparently there's a conspiracy theory that has been... it's been proven true, like all of them, that the sexual revolution in the 1960s and stuff like that was amplified by real estate companies that were trying to get people to move out of their family compounds into these condos. And hey, how are you gonna have an orgy when you're at your parents' house, man? You can't be banging with your dad at home. And it was kind of a ploy to sell more real estate. Is you can't live with your parents. Only losers live with their parents. And then you're sitting here, and I had never considered this when you brought it up to me. And you're so right. You're like, for 10,000 years, you lived on your family's compound. The idea was to make your family's compound bigger, build the castle, inherit it from your father. Like,
there's so much power to that.
Holy shit. I'm thinking of my own family. I'm like, my God, if me and my sisters with the rent that we've paid in our lives, put that into my parents, it's like the house that we'd have as a family made me sick to my stomach.
It's coming back though. So the Gen Zs are actually doing this, which is actually refreshing, and that they're doing something that I think is cool. But they're buying these really big houses and these estates, and multiple families are moving in, not related, and they're like helping raise each other's kids and contribute. And it's going back to a tribe essentially, right? And it's like, I don't know. I think a lot of our problems come from lack of connection. So yes, money solves a lot of issues, but also the feeling of contribution is also really important too. So like my job, even if it is to pick up the dog poop, is really important. And if I can find contribution in that, then you can do it without the chip on your shoulder.
You could build in that house.
Yeah.
If you and all your brothers and sisters and
for sure,
you all pitched into this one establishment as opposed to diverting your resources. I mean, that's all I think about now. You've kind of ruined
Let's
me
do it.
constantly.
Let's get a freaking compound.
No. Yeah.
There's a guy here in Texas.
I got it.
Sorry, buddy.
But I don't know if I can do it because it's been so ingrained in me that I can't have sex within half a mile of my mother and father.
We'll get you a different wing, but we've got to wrap because we're gonna run out of card space. Let's think of a way to, I guess we'll leave it there, but do you want to let everyone know how they can support you, follow you, all of that? We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. So I'm on all the social media except Facebook because they banned me for life at Conceptual James. That was for a joke about the MAID program. I said in Socialist Canada, suicide hotline calls you, and Facebook banned me for the rest of my life for that because it's true. And then my website is newdiscourses.com, and it's at New Discourses on all the social media platforms. The podcast is the New Discourses podcast on all the podcasting platforms.
And I would very highly recommend his Race Marxism,
which I use the Nat Bowl flag for as the cover, the National Bolshevism flag. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an easy read, but it is.
That's a grown-up read, yeah.
But it's gonna open your eyes to a lot of the things that have happened over the last 10 years.
Actually, chapters 1, 2, and 5 are pretty easy, and the rest are hard.
So get it for 1, 2, and 5.
I found it all hard. Anyway,
that's a you problem.
It is, and I'm Gerard Michaels. If you guys don't know me by now, I don't know what else I can do. But please follow me on X. I'm very popular everywhere but X. Follow me on X, where I am very impotent. That would be very nice of you. Thank you.
Sweet, yeah. And then we'll link all of our sponsors and affiliates below. We will see you for the next episode. Bye, everybody.